Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Doctor Who What If. And in this episode I'm going to be talking about what had happened if the 10th Doctor had actually regenerated in Stolen Earth. And of course, in our timeline, in the episode Stolen Earth, the 10th Doctor was struck down by a Dalek just as he was about to be reunited with Rose. And that triggered his regeneration. So the episode ended on this cliffhanger. And I remember watching this episode for the first time. I watched this episode live when it was brand new, back in 2008. I was only a kid back then. I was a 9-year-old Doctor Who fan. David Tennant was my favourite Doctor. He still is to this day. And yeah, I was like, oh my god, is this the end of the 10th Doctor? It can't be. I mean, there's one episode left. Let him finish his season. So yeah, I had to wait an entire week to find out if this truly was the end of the 10th Doctor or not. And I was thinking, who's the new Doctor going to be? There's been no announcements. And of course, I tuned in the following Saturday, and then to watch Journey's End. And then, of course, he ciphered off all the regeneration energy into his severed hand, which he lost in Christmas Invasion in the sword fight with the Sycorax. So yeah, that stopped him from changing, so we still had the 10th Doctor. But we're going to go into an alternative timeline here. What if the 10th Doctor had actually changed in Stolen Earth? What if Matt Smith had debuted as the 11th Doctor 2 years earlier than what he did in our timeline? I'm still using Matt Smith here because obviously he's my second favourite Doctor, and I wouldn't want anybody else playing the 11th Doctor, so we're going to say that the 11th Doctor is still going to be played by Matt Smith, but 2 years earlier than what he did in our timeline. So most of the episode of Stolen Earth would still play out the same, but then 10th Doctor would still be shot down by the Dalek as he's about to be reunited with Rose. But of course, this triggers his regeneration immediately, so he regenerates before he can get back into the TARDIS, and then cipher all the regeneration energy into his hand. So he regenerates sort of like out in the street where it happens. Of course, Captain Jack still comes along and destroys the Dalek, and then the three of them witness him regenerate into Matt Smith. So, of course, Stolen Earth will end there. So then, Journey's End would play out pretty much the same, but there will be a few tweaks. For instance, when the TARDIS gets thrown into the core of the Dalek ship, instead of Donna being trapped inside there, it will be the newly regenerated 11th Doctor unconscious, because he's suffering from the effects of post-regeneration, so he's unconscious inside there. But then he's awakened by the smell of the console room burning around him. And then, of course, this causes the meta crisis still happens. So, yeah, the jar smashes, it shatters, and then the 10th Doctor's severed hand then grows into the half-human clone of the 10th Doctor, which still happened in our timeline. But so we still get to see David Tennant as the 10th Doctor in this alternative version of Journey's End, but it's a clone of him. It's the Meta Crisis, not the original. So in this one we get, because of course the 11th Doctor and the 10th Doctor did meet in Day of the Doctor, 50th anniversary special. But in our timeline, that would be their second meeting. So this is the first time we see the 10th and the 11th Doctor together. So the two of them work together because the 11th Doctor is newly regenerated. He's born in the middle of a Dalek invasion, so he's full of like anger and revenge. And so is the Meta Crisis Doctor. So the two of them work together to build the weapon to destroy the Daleks, but the weapon, of course, does get destroyed. Yeah, and they both repair the TARDIS, and of course at the end, the Metacrisis Doctor still ends up staying with Rose, because that was a happy ending. But then because Donna wasn't in the TARDIS when the Metacrisis thing happened, the Doctor would have no reason to wipe her memory. So instead, I would say, because the Doctor's changed, because he's different, Donna would decide not to continue travelling with him. So, and I think the specials would still happen. You know, the next Doctor, the 2008 Christmas special, that would still play out the same, but just with the 11th Doctor instead of the 10th Doctor. Planet of the Dead would also play out the same as well. You know, the Easter special, that would still be the same, except it would just be the 11th Doctor instead of the 10th. And also that's the episode where the prophecy of the 10th Doctor's death is first revealed. So obviously, you know, that bit would be removed, obviously. And Waters of Mars would play out the same for the most part, just with the 11th Doctor in place of the 10th. But I think the ending would be different, because I don't think the Time Lord Victorious would happen with the 11th Doctor. That was more of a 10th Doctor thing. So I don't think it would happen with the 11th Doctor. I think he wouldn't try and meddle with a fixed point in time. I think he would let the crew on Bowie Base die. Although he does it with such regret. He regrettably leaves them behind to die, but he knows it's a fixed point, so he can't meddle with it. And then we get to the end of time. Again, mostly it would still play out the same, but with a few differences, because Donna would still show up, obviously, but because the Metacrisis thing didn't happen to her, which means her mind didn't get wiped, she still remembers the Doctor. So in this one, we still have the Doctor teaming up with Wilfrid, but this one Donna joins the Doctor and Wilfrid to help stop the Master. So yeah, it'll be the same, but apart from that, it'll be almost the same, but it'll be the 11th Doctor once again in place of the 10th. And obviously the references to the prophecy of the Doctor's death would also be removed completely. And obviously Wilfrid doesn't, in this version, he doesn't go into the radiation booth, so the Doctor survives. He returns Donna and Wilfrid back home, and then once he gets into the TARDIS, something starts to go wrong with the TARDIS. The controls start exploding after he sets it in flight, and then that takes us that leads up to the events of the 11th hour, the opener of Series 5. And then everything from then on would play out exactly the same as it did in our timeline. Now, I think obviously in the special, the theme song will still stay the same as it did in Series 4 for the specials. And so with the TARDIS interior, all that wouldn't change. It wouldn't change until Series 5. And I think his outfit would be different. So I think in the 11th hour, I think that would be the first time he puts on his tweed jacket and his bow tie. So I think in the previous episode, in the specials, because I remember when Matt Smith was first announced as the 11th Doctor, there was a photo of him in the paper standing next to a TARDIS, and he was wearing a black suit and a green jumper. So let's say that's the outfit that he wears in the specials. Well, that's the outfit he changes into at the end of Journey's End, and then he wears that throughout the specials. But then when the TARDIS gets destroyed in End of Time, the outfit gets torn and burned. So yeah, we'd still get the Raggedy Doctor reference in the 11th Hour, except he'd be wearing, he'd just be, his outfit would just be different, but it'd still be all torn. So that's what will lead to him wanting to change his outfit. So that's where he first wears the iconic bow tie. And this does also mean that the 11th Doctor's first few episodes, you know, he'll be like without a consistent companion until Series 5. Because, of course, Series 5 he meets Amy, but then, I mean, he'd still have Donna and Rose and Jack with him in Journey's End. But in the others, he would only have like a one-off companion in each one. But yeah. And if this did happen, would this lead to Matt Smith leaving Doctor Who a bit earlier than what he did in our timeline? Personally, I wouldn't want that to happen. In this alternative timeline, he still stays on in Doctor Who until 2013. So, in this alternative timeline, that means he does Doctor Who for 5 years. So that means in this alternative timeline, Matt Smith would be the longest running Doctor during the modern era. And fun fact, that was originally when Matt Smith had signed on to play the Doctor. I think originally he was supposed to do 5 years, but he ended up doing 3 years. But yeah, it's just interesting. I didn't even think of that when I started preparing this video. It just crossed my mind just now. It's coincidental. But yeah, what do you think? What do you think of this alternative timeline? And I'm not trying to rewrite history here. I'm happy with Stolen Earth and Journey's End, the way it turned out. I mean, it's a perfect two-parter. But you know, this is just for a bit of fun. You know, what do you think of this alternative timeline? Let me know in the comments below. But bear in mind, just keep the comments respectful. And so, hope you enjoyed this episode, and take care.